So, as you know, this coming fall, the fall of 2024, college football is going to look completely different. We got 16 teams in the SEC. We got 18 teams in the Big Ten. We got 16 teams in the Big 12. And I'm not even totally sure on the ACC. I think it's 18 if you include, yes, Stanford, Cal, and SMU. So the sport is going to look different. Oh, by the way, we are going to the 12-team college football playoff this coming year. Everybody was excited about it. Everybody was happy about it, except for all the suits that actually run the sport. And that is because on Wednesday afternoon, we got a report from Pete Thamel at ESPN that all the power brokers in college football, all the conference commissioners are meeting in Dallas this week. And you know what was a topic of conversation? Expanding the 12-team college football playoff to 14. Okay, so just to be clear, just so no one is confused, we just finished our last 4-team college football playoff about 6 weeks ago. Congrats to the Michigan Wolverines. You won that bad boy. We're going to 12 next year. We have yet to even play a 12-game playoff. And they're already talking about expanding it for the 2026 season. And let me say this, people, I know there's a lot of real world issues going on. I know there's a lot of serious stuff. I know in the grand scheme, sports is not that big of a deal. But when I think about this, and when I think about what the powers that be are trying to do to our sport, it makes my skin crawl. Okay. And I'm not saying it's worse than this or it's worse than that or it's the worst thing that ever happened. But when you understand why this is happening and you understand what these people are doing to our sports, it is just despicable. There is no other way to put it. So the bottom line in the ESPN article, there is a reference, which I thought was interesting, where Bill Hancock, who's basically the meat shield, he's the guy that's got to take all the heat for all the conference commissioners. He met with Thamel, and he said the issues at hand with only 12 teams are access, distribution of money, and governance, okay? And so I'm not going to bore you with details, but essentially what this comes down to is those first two things. It is access, in other words, how many teams can each conference get in, and also the financials, the distribution of money, and let's call a spade a spade. What it really comes down to, the SEC knows that they have the most power along with the Big Ten, and those are the conferences that are going to push for more bids, more expansion, and basically their argument is going to be, unless you want us to take our ball and go home and you guys can play a tournament without us and everyone will know it's not a national championship, you better give us the majority of those bids. And according to the Thamel article, we're talking as many as potentially like 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten and the SEC. So let's dive in and let me start by saying this. On the one hand, like I sort of kind of get the argument. I don't love it, but I sort of get it. Because what they're saying is essentially, and Greg Sankey's not going to say this publicly, but what he's trying to say is us, Texas or Oklahoma or LSU or Florida or Georgia or Alabama or whoever, or Auburn for producer Matt. We'll get producer Matt's alma mater in here, pretend that they're going to be in the playoff next year, okay? So bottom line is, what the SEC is trying to say is, like, without saying it, they're like, listen, our 8-4 is better than the Big 12's 11-2, okay? And it's not totally wrong, and so I sort of get it, and so I sort of understand. But fundamentally to me, expanding, first of all, I wasn't even in favor of expanding to 12. I've said for years, in most seasons, this past one was really the first one where we actually had a real argument at 4 versus 5 and you felt like somebody got screwed. That hasn't happened in a decade. Most years we're struggling to get 4 teams into that playoff that are truly deserving. And so I said, listen, I conceded, we're going to 12. There's nothing we can do. And maybe it's not the worst thing. Maybe we get a second or third or fourth SEC team in. And remember, in the 12-team structure, which we know we'll have for at least 2024 and 2025, the bottom line is we're going to have 5 automatic bids and we're going to have 7 at-large spots. And so I only bring it up to very simply say this. If we're stuck on 12 And the concern is access. Let's be perfectly honest. Whether it's the SEC or the Big Ten, they're going to get a minimum of 3 and most likely 4 bids every year, right? Like I suspect that of those 7 at-large bids, I would guess 5 to 6 are going to come from the SEC and the Big Ten every single year. And so complaining about access, claiming you need more teams, what you're basically arguing is that the 5th best team in the SEC deserves to play for a spot at the national champion. They deserve a seat at the table. To which I say, that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. And this is the thing that frustrates me about all of this. There are times where I don't like stuff, but the argument at least makes sense. This is not one of those times, because what you're arguing is that the 5th best team in the SEC, even the 4th best team in the Big Ten, even if you add Oregon and Washington this year, we're talking about a scenario where now we're arguing over Penn State, somebody like that, whoever out of the Big Ten. And so I could go on and on. But the bottom line remains is that what we're essentially arguing is that the SEC needs a 5th team, that the Big Ten needs a 5th team, and I just don't buy it. This past year, if we had a 14-team playoff, you know who would have gotten in? The LSU Tigers as the number 14 seed. You know who hated watching the LSU Tigers? LSU Tigers fans hated them. They were ready to run off Brian Kelly. They basically forced them to shake up the whole defensive staff. So don't sell me that LSU was somehow screwed. They were not. The people that'll tell you they weren't screwed were LSU fans. They're furious. And so that's my fundamental issue. I can disagree if the argument makes sense, but the argument doesn't even make sense. And so what this is all about is money. And I will say this. There is no one to blame other than the people that have been complicit with all of this expansion in the first place. Whether it's the media that can't see the forest through the trees, the media that tried to convince you that we have to go beyond 4 because none of these kids play in these bowl games. Well, guess how that started? Because you told them all they were meaningless. Or fans that pushed for it as well. And like I said, I conceded 12 is okay. But we start going beyond 12. Here is where my concern comes in. At what point, because this is the counter argument. I saw Jack Mack from Barstool Sports. I don't know him well, but he's a Connecticut kid, UConn guy. So, we're kind of brothers in arms here. But he brought up this point is like everybody is complicit in all of this because you started down the slippery slope. And so I bring it up because my concern is this. You get beyond 12. At what point does the regular season start to matter less? And the people, and this was the point that Jack Mack made, is that the people that will fight against this, that want 14, 16, 32, whatever, however many teams, oh, you just don't like football. Is that what it is? Just tell us like it is you don't like football. Well, wait a second now. I like football, but I want my September football to matter. I want my October football to matter, and November as well. And so at the larger this college football playoff gets, the more concerned that I am that the value in the regular season continues to disintegrate. Every team that you let in, it makes the regular season less important. And I've said this for 6, 8, 12 months. But just think about college football. Every sport in America right now, outside of the NFL, is trying to figure out ways to make their regular season more compelling. Major League Baseball is changing all its rules. I don't even know what the rule are. You start with a runner on second and whatever, trips to the mound, like widen the bases. I don't even know what's going on in baseball, okay? The NBA, and we're going to talk about the NBA and Aaron right, Aaron wrong, because I've been right on everything with Adam Silver, but neither here nor there. The NBA is basically doing everything they can to get you to pay attention at all, and nobody is. Now, that's a player problem, but they have the in-season tournament. They're shaking up the All-Star game. They're doing this. They're doing that. Nobody cares. Even college basketball. I love college basketball. Why do we have all these early season tournaments? Why do we play all these weird, one-off, whatever, Gonzaga playing Kentucky in the middle of the season? It's to get people interested. College football is the one sport that has a regular season that from day one, you have to be invested in. Now, the NFL is the same, but the NFL, you're invested because of fantasy, because of gambling, because of whatever. College football, you're invested because it matters. Every single week matters. The SEC, their motto is it just means more. Well, guess what? That's all of college football right now. And the further we expand the playoff, the more it dilutes the regular season. You cannot argue that. And the example that I'll use is a sport that I love that we have talked about a lot on this show, and that is college basketball. And I love college basketball, but I'm also going to be completely honest with you. The numbers of people that are interested in college basketball, at least in the regular season, and I hate to say it because if you listen to this show, you like college basketball and you want to talk about it in January and February. But the interest in college basketball is negligible compared to college football. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I could do one video on Deion Sanders on YouTube, one video on Kalen DeBoer, Nick Saban, LSU's defense. It's going to do the same number of views as 10 college basketball videos. And it sucks, but it's the truth. And the college basketball season, the older I get, the less significant it becomes. It's going to get more significant when they expand the playoff, when they expand the tournament. And the tournament matters more. And so if you love the tournament, that's great. But the regular season, nobody pays attention to for 4 months. We started the beginning of November, as I'm about to knock over my mic here. We started in the beginning of November. It's now late February, and we just are starting to pay attention. And the deeper we go with this college football playoff, it'll be a great tournament, and no one will pay attention to the regular season. Now, I know it's college football. I don't think it's that dire. I don't think we're going to go from 16 million people watching Michigan, Ohio State to 800,000. But at the same time, this is what makes college football college football. And so it's so frustrating. It is so angering. If you love college football, this is not good. And don't sell me, oh, so many more teams will be in, but at the sake of what? At the sake of what? We don't need 5 SEC teams. We don't need 6, 7 SEC teams. We don't need 6, 7 Big Ten teams. We'll figure it out. But the idea that we're already trying to blow it up, and here's the worst part. Here is the worst part about it, is the fact that it doesn't really benefit any of us. The same 7 teams that are always good are going to be good. Yeah, if you're an Ohio State fan, it's great. If you're a Georgia fan, it's great. But you know who's going to benefit from it? It's going to be the suits that don't care about the sport. You know who's leading this charge, by the way, which cracks me up? Tony Petitti. Do you even know who Tony Petitti is? He is the Big Ten commissioner. You understand that Tony Petitti has been involved in college sports for less than a year? You understand that Tony Petitti does not have your best interest. He does not care about you. He doesn't even understand you, okay? The bottom line remains is that the people making these decisions, they don't have your best interest at heart. They don't care about your school. They care about lining their checkbooks and pocketbooks. It is terrible, and I freaking hate it.